You're listening to Seattle Real Estate Podcast.
I'm Sean Reynolds, the owner of Summer Properties Northwest and Reynolds Kline Appraisal, and your host for this episode on March 24th of the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. A ton has happened since yesterday's podcast, and I'm going to kind of run through all of that for you and tell you what I think, tell you my predictions, and tell you I think the impact that this is going to have right now and long term. So going through the presidential address last night, there's a lot of information there that points to us going to back and resuming our lives much sooner than people anticipated. I've been predicting this since last week. If you followed my narrative at all in the Seattle Real Estate Podcast, I've been saying this is going to blow over, not because of the medical side of things it's going to blow over, but because the narrative is going to change. And that has changed drastically. Last week, I was basically stating, I called either April 6th or April 13th as the day that we go back. And when I say go back to work, I mean we resume kind of our daily lives, our daily activities. I just picked a couple of dates that I thought this is what I think is going to happen and why. And if you want to watch those podcasts, you can check out our daily podcast that we've been doing since the coronavirus kind of really hit mainstream media. And when I made those predictions, a lot of people were like, what? That makes no sense at all. The media is telling us this could be, a year and a half. It could be 18 months. This could be years. And I was like, no, it's going to be a matter of weeks and it's going to be over and everybody goes back to work, and it'll be one of those cases where even though the virus is still out there and still going, it becomes secondary because the focus now is on the economy. And that shift happened over this last weekend that I said would. And then yesterday specifically, I was kind of shocked by the president's reaction yesterday. But I think what really happened was China had some economic news come out. And guess what? It was horrific. I mean, when you shut an entire country down with millions and millions and millions of people, you're not going to have much economic output. And so I think President Trump saw what happened in China and said, not on my watch. If you watch a couple of the measures, two of the measures that President Trump really hammers on is unemployment. He has worked very hard at spreading the narrative that under his presidency, unemployment is down. You can argue that, I think a lot of people have just given up. They're giving up working, so unemployment numbers are down. But a lot of people have been working, and it has been a very good time for the economy. Economy was just roaring through February. And then we artificially, boom, hit this point at which stopped the economy. So I think the administration right now, presidential administration, is looking at China for some numbers. They saw some numbers, and Trump was literally like, we're not doing that. We're not going that road. I may need to sacrifice some lives, and I may need to push out a new narrative, but this is what we're doing. And so last night, I think in the presidential address, there was a number of key things that happened that basically are telltale signs of what is to come. So we're on a 15-day shutdown, right? And that started as of, I think, the 16th of March. And that's going to go through till the end of March, beginning of April. And a lot of states are kind of on that same timeline too. But I think a lot of people are expecting this to go for way longer because, oh my gosh, we're hearing about all this stuff in the media that we don't have enough masks, we don't have enough ventilators. Those storylines are going to take a distant second. The media is going to stop covering those, and it's going to go to putting the American people back. And that's what I've been predicting. And guess what? That narrative is happening right now as we speak. And I think the closer we get to the stimulus package being solved, that comes out, focus goes on that, stock market comes roaring back. If you were a betting person, put all your money into the stock market right now, March 24th. You're going to see an incredible run because when this thing happened, it was an artificial stop of the economy. It was something outside. It was external. It was an external force. It was a virus. You take away the threat of that virus, you go back to an economy, try and pick up the pieces, I think it will really rally. And that's not because I have a ton of money in the stock market. I have some, but it's not incredible. But it's because of the way that business will, you've got an ebb and flow, and I think you're going to have a real barn burner when things kind of get turned around here, when there's a solid footing for the economy to kind of get back onto when people start mentally getting used to the idea of we're going back to work way sooner than we thought. So I was met with a lot of looks of like, I think you could be onto something. And then I would say, hear me out. Here is why we're going back to work either April 6th or the 13th. And at the end of the conversations, they would say, yeah, you know what? You could be right. But what about this exponential explosion of the virus? Like, yeah, that's what viruses do. They go like that, and then they burn out. And so I think what will happen is with the warm weather, the virus is going to burn out. Yep. Are we going to have more cases? Absolutely. Do we have shortages right now of ventilators and masks? It's kind of hard to say. I know people are making a ton of them in case we do actually have shortages, but I haven't seen any instance where they've had shortages and somebody's died. So some more things in the presidential address was this is not going to take months. He's going to put us back to work in a matter of weeks. And in reality, I think it goes to days. I think right now is March 24th. I think March 31st comes around, and that is the first date. And I think between the 24th and the 31st, every single day, the president will bring in his team of people and say it's safe to go back to work. The economy can't take the beat down that it's going to take if you put everybody out to work. So here's what we're doing. On the national level, everything gets lifted. I don't think it'll get lifted on the 31st, and that's why I've been saying April 6th. That's my call. And then a hedge bet is, all right, I think the states are going to say, yeah, we're not really comfortable going back to work quite yet. Let's make it April 13th. And I'm okay with that. And either the 6th or the 13th are Mondays. Should we be doing this? I don't know. I'm not a doctor, but this is what's going to happen. The one thing that everybody has forgotten about is, we go into a countrywide lockdown. State by state, they shut things down. Who's going to pay for that? You and I as the American worker? No. We're broke. We're out of jobs. We don't have businesses that are running. And I say this on behalf of the American people because in my case, one of my businesses is an essential business. That's Reynolds Kline Appraisal. Summit Properties Northwest is a real estate brokerage. That's being shut down as of right now. We've got 24 or 48 hours to kind of get our stuff in order. But that's been happening across the other states. They've gone into statewide shutdowns. So half of my two businesses, it's shut down. You're not going to be able to do much. You're going to have to work from home, do what you can, wait for this to be lifted. But the American people, I think, have underestimated that the federal government would bail this thing out. And there is no way that this presidential office is going to take the tab for unemployment and the hit on the economy, not on his watch. That is not happening. So it is back to work, people, and that's why you're being set up right now to go back either April 6th or the 13th. And those are the days I keep hammering on because that's what makes the most sense. And I kind of outlined why in yesterday's podcast, but it's actually a pretty easy call. And other things in the president's speech last night was this country is not meant to be shut down, all right? But we just shut it down a week ago. So we got through a solid 7 days of shutdown before we're talking about reopening. Is that irresponsible? I don't know. Again, I'm not a doctor. There's still a lot of cases going around. But is this a situation where you shut the entire country down? I don't know. I guess we'll have to find out and see. And that leads me into, I'm not a doctor. Other experts are who know way more than I do. And they go from, well, this is nothing more than a little cough to if this thing really spreads, you're going to wipe out California, you're going to wipe out New York. And there's all of these, now we know how we're all going to die narratives, right? We could die tomorrow. Everybody's going to get infected and we're going to die. Well, we know that's not going to happen. It seems to only really impact a certain segment of the population. But if you get sick, yeah, it's brutal. And we don't still have a full kind of recognition of the impact of this virus. We haven't seen the numbers, we haven't done the testing, but to me, that all becomes it becomes yesterday's news. Not because it should be, not because this is the most responsible thing, but that's the way this narrative is going. So this country is not meant to be shut down, all right? So, yep, we got that. All right, so we're going to push this to open. It's going to be not a matter of months, but weeks. And in my opinion, it's down to days. I think we got 14, 15 days. And you will have had a week or two of the president saying it's time to go back to work. Here's why. He's going to march out his economic people and say what it's going to turn to is the impact from not having America go to work is going to be far worse than the actual virus. And if you look at our most recent example of that, the Great Depression, that was true. More people died of starvation after the Great Depression than the impact of the actual Great Depression when it happened. It was the impact of the stock market absolutely collapsing and run on banks and everything else because we didn't have all these social measures in place. Not that we have a great many in place right now, but the impact was after those things happened. And it would be like the impact after we shut America down for 3 or 4 months. So who's going to pay? That's the question nobody's asked. Yeah, we need to shut this down. We got to shut it down for a long time to kill this virus. All right, who's going to pay for that? And I go back to, it's not going to be you or I, the American worker, because we don't have any money. We're out of jobs. Our businesses are not running. Is the federal government. They are basically, that's why I think they've rolled out as many things as they have. And for those of you watching on YouTube, I point to CNBC. And I don't follow any one particular media, but I watch them all because I want to catch little tidbits that some people will bring up and other people don't. But if you are watching what's going on, the stock market is starting to rally because I think they're getting close to a stimulus package, and that will bring some stability to the marketplace. Another amazing thing that I saw yesterday was during the Trump speech, Dr. Anthony Fauci, and I'm still not really, I don't really know how to pronounce that, and I haven't had anybody else tell me exactly how it is. I am looking at my phone because I was having a text message with my friend Gavin Turner in Australia. He's in Sydney. And the message was, I sent him back, here's what our president said on Dr. Fauci not being at yesterday's press conference. He's not here because we weren't discussing issues that he is best at addressing. Let me read that again. Dr. Fauci is not here because we weren't discussing issues that he is best at addressing. Actually, I think he is the best at addressing those, but we're going to ignore his narrative, and I don't think there was even an explanation of what he was doing. When you have a presidential address that at the heart is a virus, and you've got a doctor that has a pretty good handle on viruses, I think you take that guy's recommendation. But what the message was is that if you are not kind of on board with putting the country back to work, yeah, you're probably not going to have a mouthpiece. And that is why I think all of the media is going to focus on the economy and the virus basically just goes away. But I think everybody has to figure out what their threshold is. Do you stay home? Yeah, I'm going to keep staying home for the most part. I come in here to record this podcast. There's one other guy with me, Darian Dunstan. But I'm only having one guy come in at a time, and we are socially distancing. There's no other people in the office, and for me, it's about a 2.5 mile drive, and I'm not really seeing anybody when I get out of my car because there's nobody else at the office. We're going to keep up the podcast because under the Reynolds Kline side of things, I still need to operate Reynolds Kline Appraisal as an essential business to do with financial services. So we keep the podcast going. But for everybody else, things get shut down. And so with the narrative that Dr. Fauci is out, we're basically going to have people in that state and that support it's time to go back to work. I personally feel that it's a little bit early to be talking that. I think that was a tough political move to make, but it makes sense. I don't think the current administration has a lot of patience, shall we say, and I think this was a move to get things moving. On a business side of things, yes, but on a humanitarian side of things, is it a little early? Probably, but this is what's going to happen. And that's all I've been saying is, hey, I don't agree with this, but you're going to go back to work way sooner than you think. Our lives are going to go back to normal. School is another one. I think a lot of schools are out for the summer. School year is over. I'd be very surprised to see school districts make the decision, you know what, we've still got this virus going around in our community. People are still dying. People are being infected at a pretty good clip. Not huge, because this virus by numbers is actually very small. Worldwide, it is not that impactful of a virus so far. The numbers just aren't that great. You compare it to other major pandemics, it's kind of small fries. And I might take a lot of heat for that, but look at the numbers. Could it explode? Yeah, but I don't think it will. I just don't. I think it's going to burn out, and this goes away. A lot of people are talking about, well, if you put people back to work, you're going to have a case where everybody gets reinfected, or people get infected for the first time and it becomes just this crazy cluster. Yeah, and that is one of the major considerations of putting people back to work so early in the game. But right now, I think it's just a narrative change. We're no longer talking about all the stuff to do with the virus. We are talking about going back to work. School, that one's a tough one. I don't really know what to think about that one, but I think it's all done. If you were a betting person, you would put a ton of money in the stock market, like I've said, and see where that goes, because I think this thing's going to go on a roll, and that will fall into the narrative. I think what the president will say is that he called it early. The virus didn't do what the naysayers were going to say it was going to do, and he is responsible for putting America back to work. And that is where he's going with this. And that was pretty clear over the weekend, and that was exceptionally clear last night. One of the more interesting things that coincides with that is that the Washington State's governor, I'm in Bellevue, Washington, Governor Inslee is my governor, he instituted, last Friday, he basically said, hey, you guys aren't really doing what you're supposed to do with this not a stay-in-place order, but hey, socially distance yourselves. And then there was all these images like from all of these small mountaintops like Mount Si and Rattlesnake Ridge, hundreds of people over the weekend congregating, clearly not practicing social distancing. So Governor Inslee, and I think it was the right call, he put us on a 2-week, basically, it's a stay home, stay safe order. And you just basically got to stay home. It doesn't really change much, but there's some businesses that aren't essential businesses that will be closed. One of the ones that I found interesting is that marijuana dispensaries are still open. They are considered an essential business. I find that really interesting. It's like, but then again, I saw that one. I was like, that's interesting. What about liquor stores? Are they essential? I don't know. Are they being closed? I'm not sure. There's a ton of businesses that are being impacted, and the ones that I were looking at were in the financial sector and the housing sector, because those are my businesses, and I'm trying to figure out what information to get out to my people. And I sent out an email kind of saying, hey, what I know, and I'll keep you posted as possible. Because I spent a lot of my time just going through the news and going through the information. And so much of this is not clear. We don't really know. And so that's where I think we're going to have some massive issues with the federal government saying one thing and then each individual state government saying another. But with Governor Inslee's 15-day lockdown that starts, I think it either starts yesterday, which was Monday the 23rd, or goes into effect on Wednesday the 26th, 5th, whatever it is. I think you have Tuesday, Wednesday to get your business done, and then Thursday it goes into effect. But what's going to happen is you're going to have some real at odds moments with state governors who feel like, hey, we should still be in social isolation, not sending people back to work. And they're going to have some real heat from the federal level that it's time to go back to work, get your people back on the assembly line. And let's get this thing going again, even though I think a lot of people are thinking, this is way too early. We shouldn't be doing this. So you're going to have a real at odds probably next week back and forth. But the narrative has already been started much earlier than I thought that the coronavirus is no longer a threat. And we want to avoid the economic misery that something like shutting down the country for 3 or 4 months would have. And then, so you've got the federal, and then you've got the state, that battle going on. And then I think there's also a worldwide battle going on because we are looking at China for direction. China put their workers back to work after 51 days. And Wuhan province, where this thing all started, their people are out of social lockdown. And that's less than 2 months where the world's greatest outbreak happened initially. That's where it happened. And those people are back to work. Now, you can argue that the Chinese government isn't real transparent and they've basically stopped their numbers reporting. Yep, that has happened. But other countries in the world are going to look at that and go, oh, okay, that's what they're doing. Let's follow suit. And I think Trump, with his narrative, let's go back to work, people, I think that's going to push other countries around the world to do the same. And there's a fair amount of countries, Australia included. Yesterday, I think Australia had a total of 8 deaths. And the day before, they had 7 deaths. But right now, they are being told that they are on 6 months of lockdown. Let me repeat that. 6 months of lockdown, 8 deaths. Does that make sense? I don't think so. But maybe from a medical standpoint, that's what it would take to really break the back of the virus and flatten that curve. I don't know as far as Australia goes. It's a warm weather climate, and with a lot of sunlight and a lot of temperature heat, the virus doesn't do well. We know that for sure. So I think that's a massive overreaction, and I think Australia will have a little bit longer social distancing period than the United States, but it's basically going to blow over and go away. And again, I don't know if that's a good thing or a bad thing, but that's what will happen. That's what we're seeing happen right now. So another thing that you're going to see is you're going to see individual governors based on their party lines either support the president or kind of meekly say you are crazy and you are out of line. But nobody really wants to come under the wrath of President Trump and his tweeting powers. Follow his tweets if you want to see what's going to happen. That always gives you a pretty good clue. You see those in the news and you kind of blow them off. Well, he's got the power right now to kind of control the story and make you believe what he wants you to believe. The story that I saw right before I came on to shoot this podcast is the governor of Texas came out and said, don't worry about us senior citizens. We'll take care of ourselves. And at that point in time, I was kind of like, maybe not. He came out and said, we'll take senior citizens. Don't worry about senior citizens. We'll take care of ourselves. Don't sacrifice the economy on our behalf. Well, all right. That's an interesting statement, but that basically is why we're sacrificing the economy, because the majority of people that have died from this virus are the elderly. And we want to keep them safe, and I think you can open up the economy and keep those most at risk. I think you can do that. Can you prevent the spread? Not so much, because when you got people running around doing jobs, that virus is going to spread. So, be careful with those at risk. Those people are going to need to still self-isolate, and there's going to be a lot of situations that aren't clear, and people are going to have to make their own personal judgment calls. Because I think what we've learned from all of this is that there's so many different messages being stated out there. You have to go with the one that you think is right, and you have to kind of think things through. And you can't believe everything on the news, I mean, clearly, because if you did, we would all be dead right now. If you believed the initial reports of the coronavirus, we should all be dead, and I should not be doing this podcast. Because it's just this, ferocious virus that's going to come and basically wipe out all mankind. Well, that hasn't happened. There's something different. But it's still very active. It's still taking lives all over the world. It's still growing. To what extent, we don't know, because we really haven't had the tests to come back in as much time. We just haven't had enough tests, enough data to kind of figure out what is really going on. So let's talk about kind of where we sit right now. What can we expect shortly in the short term? I think the stimulus package will happen very quickly. But if you expect to see a check anytime soon, Don't think that's going to happen. You're still probably going to have checks go out sometime in May and maybe a second round in June. Or April and May, not May and June. But the longer they delay this out, the longer it is that you're going to get a check. And for a lot of people, they're without work right now. And this check is barely going to put a dent in their bills. I think you're going to see a lot of housing lenders give some reprieves. I think you might see some of that come down. A lot of this we'll see in the financial package. The federal government is doing everything on their end. They're doing mortgage-backed by securities, all of their thing. You know, they cut the federal funds rate to 0 to a little bit over 0. They're doing whatever they can, but that is kind of a mastery to keep the numbers up. If we don't have cash in our system to pay our bills as the American people, guess what? It's going to get really rough. And again, I go back to who did you expect was going to pay the bills? And from that standpoint, I think the next few days are going to be really telltale of how this thing plays out, because I think you'll have the stimulus plan go in effect, and I think President Trump will get enough data together that feeds his narrative. And who knows? He might be right. If you take enough swings at bat, you're going to hit something. And if you think that we're all going to die from the virus, I don't think that's a reality. If you think it's going to go away overnight, I don't think that's a reality. It's somewhere in between. And President Trump is kind of doing what he thinks is best for the economy. So from that standpoint, I think in the next couple of days, you're going to see a ton of stuff come up that points to we are back to work much sooner than later. And again, I think watch the newscasts, watch a wide variety of news. That's if you care. If you don't care, hunker down, put your head in the sand, wait for this all to be over, because it is going to be over way sooner than later. And if you want to question that, that's fine. But, I'm just making my predictions. So again, thank you so much for watching and or listening to this podcast. I appreciate your support. We're getting more and more comments on this narrative that this thing's going away way faster than we thought. Some good, some bad, but a lot of people are like, yeah, you know what? That seems to be the case. So follow along. If nothing else, this is an amazing time to be following politics, to be following business, and to just kind of be a member of society. So thanks again for listening and watching to the Seattle Real Estate Podcast. Again, I'm your host, Sean Reynolds from Summit Properties Northwest and Reynolds Kline Appraisal. We'll see you tomorrow. All right, thank you. Bye. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell so you'll know when our next video is out.